Good morning, everyone. I hope you had a great morning. My name is Sebastian. I'll be your host for today's webinar. So today we're joined by Chairman and CEO Thian of Invion. Basically, what's going to happen is I'll introduce the company, then he'll do a presentation, and then we'll just have some questions at the end, really quick, really basic. So yeah, over to you, Thian. Thank you very much.
Great, thanks, Sebastian, and thanks for the opportunity to share our story with you. So, can you see the presentation?
Yeah, all good.
Excellent. Okay. So Invion has a next generation photodynamic therapy, which we believe can potentially provide a mainstream alternative to cancer treatments that the current standard of care has challenges against. And we are actually just finished a clinical trial, which I'll talk about in a little bit. Essentially, we just announced last week a phase 2 trial on prostate cancer, which I'll go through in a little bit. And we're actually about to start screening and recruiting for a skin cancer trial, which is a phase 1 and 2 trial. So we've been working with a number of leading institutes in Australia, including MacCallum Cancer Centre, as well as the Hudson Institute of Medical Research. And I'm going to see if this video works, but essentially, if you think about a drug which we actually inject or put on the skin, the drug actually is designed to localize just in cancer cells and not healthy tissue. And when you actually shine a frequency of light, it actually generates what's called reactive oxygen species, which basically kills just the cancer cells because that's where it's localized. Now, once you've got these fragments of cancer cells around, that white stuff you see is the immune system starts identifying those cancers and starts mopping them up. So that's essentially our mechanism of action. And essentially, we have a IV formulation, which you can inject, or we also have a topical formulation, which we're going to be using on our skin cancer trial. So in terms of the diseases we're targeting, we're really primarily focused on cancer. And as mentioned, we've completed a phase 2 trial in prostate cancer. We're undergoing a non-melanoma skin cancer trial. And we're also working with the Peter Mac in preparing for an anogenital cancer trial, which we've actually came on the back of some really interesting results, which I'll also go through. So we also found that our compounds actually are broad-spectrum antimicrobial. And even though this is not a primary focus, it is a bit of a pipeline of opportunity for us because it actually doesn't generate drug resistance. But let's talk a bit more about why no one's heard of us. And there's a bit of history behind that. We actually were meant to do clinical trials a few years ago and using an older version of our photosensitizer. And unfortunately, this little thing called COVID occurred, and we actually couldn't do the trials. We took the opportunity to actually go back to the lab and develop literally hundreds of new novel compounds. We filed a bunch of new patents around them, and we chose one of those new compounds, INV043, to be our lead cancer candidate. And as you know, before you can put new drugs into patients, you've actually got to do a lot of preclinical safety work, demonstrates efficacy. So we had to do that all over again. And over this, multi-year period, it's great to cure cancer in mice. It's great, and regulators and clinicians need to make sure it's safe before you treat humans. But the market's just not that excited about it. And that's why we've been relatively quiet for the last few years. No one's really heard of us. And so we're at a different stage now because we're at the most interesting stage, which is showing the safety and efficacy of our technology in humans. So let's talk about our lead cancer candidate, INV043. We've tested it in animal models across multiple types of cancer, including T-cell lymphoma, triple-negative breast cancer, pancreatic cancer, anal squamous cell carcinoma models. And it kills those cancers quite consistently, irrespective of the type of cancer. The INV043 is also far more potent than other photosensitizers out there. For example, there's one called talaporphin sodium, and we're actually about 600 times more potent than they are. Just as importantly, ours is safe. So we've actually tested IV actually, at 100 times the therapeutic dose, and we didn't find any toxicity issues. So it's safe, it localizes selectively, and it kills cancer cells very well. It also activates the immune response, and I'll talk a little bit about that in a little bit later. But let's look at some of the cancer findings, particularly the most recent one, which is essentially our prostate cancer trial. Again, it was meant to be a larger trial, but due to COVID and lockdowns and patients couldn't get that tested, I mean, we actually unfortunately had a smaller population that was compared to the original plan, but we got some really interesting insights from these patients. So the objective of the trial, being a phase 2 trial, was to see, the primary endpoint was to see, well, how much the tumors are reduced, what sort of response rate. And we also had some secondary endpoints around safety as well as efficacy. Now, what the treatment protocol was we actually treated each patient with 6 rounds of PDT. And basically, it was administered sublingually, which means that you put this liquid under your tongue, and it actually gets absorbed into the bloodstream. So it's a pretty easy way to administer to patients. And again, we did this 6 times. And so what did we find? Well, a really obvious outcome we found was it looks really safe. So if you look at the chart at the bottom, these were the side effects that were observed. They're all very mild, everything from fever, a bit of tiredness, a bit of soreness, nothing remotely close to standard of care. Like people going through surgery, chemotherapy, radiotherapy have pretty nasty side effects. We weren't even close. I mean, everything was mild. And this was 6 administrations over a 9-week period that all went into the bloodstream. So we're very excited about how safe this treatment can be. So let's talk about efficacy signals. So one of the signals we measured was, it's called RECIST. It's basically measuring whether the tumor got smaller or disappeared. In this case, about 40% of the patients observed a smaller tumor, or in 10%, actually, no tumor was identified after 3 months. The second was essentially a marker identifying whether there was a presence of a prostate cancer-specific antigen. And we found that 44% of patients after 3 months didn't have this marker over there. So it does give us some really interesting signals around efficacy. And this is just as a standalone treatment as well. So there are a lot of interesting potential here for prostate cancer, which is actually the second largest cause of death from cancer in men. If we take a step back and look at the other cancers we might be able to apply this to, there's really going back to the 2 mechanisms of action. The first one is the selectivity. So you can actually see from this picture, there's actually 2 frequencies of light you can shine on this drug. One kills the cancer, and the other one actually fluoresces. And that's what you're seeing on the left-hand side, those little pink shiny bits, including the metastatic spots, that's actually cancers. And so if you actually shine that frequency of light, you can see the cancers, which means that the application could both be diagnostic, for example, working together with surgeons to try to identify where the cancers are, as well as the therapeutic side of things. And so in terms of killing cancers selectively and with a lot of precision, that is the first mechanism we talked about earlier. The second mechanism is activating the immune response. And in this study, which was a pilot study done by the Hudson Institute, we found that we actually implanted these immunocompetent mice that had triple negative breast cancer, which is a pretty nasty cancer. It's typically chemo resistant and typically spreads and metastasizes. You can actually see in the bottom 2 pictures on the right-hand side, the primary lesion went away. There was no scarring and no sign of metastases. Now, what was interesting was about a week later, we tried to reimplant the tumor and it actually wouldn't grow. And if you can translate this to human context, now you're talking about potentially addressing, recurrence of tumors, possibly spread of tumors or metastases, possibly some sort of protective immunity. And that's kind of the holy grail stuff. And we're not counting on that, but there are some signals that could actually be a really interesting effect of our treatment. Now, the immune response is also important because we don't have to work by ourselves. We can actually work with other therapies out there. And in fact, we've done a fair bit of work with immune checkpoint inhibitors, and they're actually the #1 selling cancer drug in the world right now by all the big pharma. And when they work, they're extremely good. They activate the immune response. The problem is they normally don't work. It's about a 12% response rate. In fact, that's the same response rate that the Peter Mac study did. Found that the standalone checkpoint inhibitors only worked about 12% of the time. By working in combination with what we had, we increased that to 80%, which is quite astounding. So we can potentially make these treatments far more effective, and that can be a really good outcome for patients. And the other interesting side is we did a similar study on a different type of cancer with the Hudson Institute with a different formulation, and it had a 65% improvement in the tumor volume. So two separate studies that had very consistent results. So we're excited about the potential here to do combination therapies as well. Now, if you think about how clinicians look at this, they want it to be, the questions are, how do you get the drug there? And how do you get the light there? So the drug, as I mentioned, there's a topical formulation, that's an ointment, as well as an IV formulation. And that same IV formulation can actually be administered intratumorally or sublingually, as is the case with the prostate cancer trial. The light itself can be obviously administered topically, but as long as you get a little, fiber optic cable through any sort of endoscope, keyhole surgery, or even through open surgery, you can get light there, which means there's a lot of different types of cancers internal to the body that are accessible and treatable through our modality. So what does that mean in terms of where we're at now? Well, clinical trials, human studies, that's what people are interested in, because you want to make sure it's safe and it works in humans. And as mentioned, we completed the prostate cancer trial, which we're looking to explore expansion into a larger study. And at the same time, we're actually in the process of screening and recruiting for a non-melanoma skin cancer trial. Now, that's going to be a phase 1 and 2 trial, and we use an adaptive study, which means that the first arm is around safety, and the second and third arms are around dose optimization and efficacy. Now, on the back of the skin cancer safety data, we're looking to use the same topical ointment, ideally in a genital cancer trial, and that can take us straight to a phase 2 potentially. And I might mention that we're doing a little bit of background work on glioblastoma, which is a pretty nasty brain cancer. It's preclinical, but it's essentially funded by a Korean pharmaceutical company called Hanlim, which means that we're really on our way to essentially having a pipeline of treatments for different sorts of cancers. I'll talk a little bit about our upcoming trial, skin cancer trial, and why we focus on skin cancer. Well, one of the big reasons is because it's actually quite cost effective to do skin cancer trials, just because it doesn't get into the bloodstream, so clinicians and regulators don't worry about the safety. And because of that reason, there's a faster path to get it to market. And as I mentioned, since we're using the same formulation for an anogenital cancer trial, there could be synergies there to basically piggyback off the safety data into a trial in anogenital cancer. It's also a very big unmet need. In fact, it's one of the world's most common cancers, and actually 2/3 of every Australian will be diagnosed with non-melanoma skin cancer by the time they're age 70. So there's definitely a very large unmet need there. Obviously, there are currently treatments that are available, and typically they're surgical type interventions, which you see at the bottom right-hand side of this matrix. And by and large, they actually work. The problem is they can have pretty nasty scarring effects. And there's actually an old PDT called Metvix owned by Galderma that actually addresses the cosmesis issues, but it doesn't work as well as surgery. What we are planning with INV-043, we know we're about 600 times more potent than an existing photosensitizer that's approved. It's the same mechanism of action as Metvix, and potentially we can argue it's even more targeted. So we might get equivalent or better cosmetic results. And it actually, we haven't noticed any pain, which is one of the big downfalls of Medvix. That's actually about 10% of patients can't even finish the treatment because it's actually too painful. So long story short, if we go to a patient and say, would you like to treat your skin cancer with or without scarring? That's essentially our proposition. And if we can demonstrate that in some of our trials, we have a potential here to displace the skin cancer treatment market. As I mentioned, we're doing a little bit of work on glioblastoma, which is, it's a pretty nasty, life-threatening disease. The survival rate's terrible. And we're working with the Korean pharmaceutical company on some proof of concept preclinical work. And that will be something we're just doing in the background that someone else pays for. The other thing to think about this longer term is how we can maybe make an impact on the world. If you look at the new drugs that are approved in the US, and that's where a lot of innovation occurs, in 2023, the cost of these new drugs went up 35% in 1 year. So the drugs could, on average, cost about 300,000 US. And that's just beyond the affordability of many people in the world. For example, in Asia, where we are, 60% of the world reside right in our backyard. Now, because our technology, it's not personalized, but it's precision, which means that it targets just cancers, but multiple cancers. We don't need to tailor everything to every patient. And we're also a small molecule, which means that we can scale our technology more cost effectively than potentially some of these other technologies that are coming in these newly approved drugs. What that means is that potentially our cost to treat is potentially closer to standard of care now, like chemo, radiotherapy, et cetera, versus the really expensive sort of personalized medicine that's in place. And so we hope that we have a potential here to impact more patients and make it more affordable. And that's also another area we want to focus on is where the people are. And in fact, 6% of clinical trial patients of FDA drugs are actually Asian, and yet 60% of the world is Asian, which is where we actually reside. And that's actually why Stanford Medical School created a Center for Asian Health Research. And I'm fortunate to have joined the board of advisors and very, very keen to make sure that the treatments that we have can impact more people in the world, not just those that can have the high affordability. I'll spend a very short time on infectious diseases because that's a kind of a pipeline for us. We actually tested a number of our new compounds on antimicrobial sort of effectiveness, viruses, bacteria, fungi. And what we found was actually works across all of them. And the other thing is because our modality is not expected to generate any resistance, it addresses one of the really big unmet needs. In fact, the World Health Organization has said that antimicrobial resistance is one of the top 10 threats to humanity. And so there's a really big unmet need there, which we're pretty excited about working on. And one of the programs I'll just quickly mention is HPV, which is actually the most common STD. And it's actually a precursor to many anogenital cancers, which we're working on with Peter Mac. The reason we like working on HPV is because someone else is paying for the program up till proof of concept clinical trials. It's a Korean company called Dr. IMB. So watch this space on the antimicrobial. We're still primarily focused on cancers. We have a fantastic team that's growing. And really, that's our presentation for today. And hopefully that gave a few snippets of the things we're doing and the potential we believe that our technology has.
Thank you so much for that, Thian. That was really insightful. So I just invite the viewers, if you have any questions that you want to ask and want to be answered, feel free to put them in the Q&A function. But just to start us off, a few questions from our company. Can you just tell us a bit more about your background and the history of the company, if you don't mind?
Yeah, absolutely, absolutely. So my background is actually anything but medical research. I only got involved about 8 years ago. My background is actually in management consulting, sort of turning around companies. And I was also in the investing and finance space. I worked on Wall Street with Goldman Sachs, both in New York and Hong Kong. And then I took the entrepreneurial path a number of years ago, and was really looking for something where I could do good while doing well. And I happened to bump into the founder of this technology, a gentleman called Michael Cho, an Australian entrepreneur who basically had invested and worked on this really interesting technology called photodynamic therapy, and actually took it to a really interesting level. And what we decided was, we got some really interesting data and feedback from people that experienced the treatment. And we said, why don't we do it mainstream? Why don't we do it properly through a regulatory pathway? Let's make more impact on people. And that's why we acquired Invion, and basically the expertise that came with it and the listed status that came with it, so we could share with the world some of the findings that we had. So that's a little bit of background, but it's a very exciting sort of stage we're at now, and these things do take time. But I feel we're really at the inflection point of really making a difference out there.
Brilliant, very exciting stuff. What would you say, I guess, is the one thing that you think is probably most exciting about the phase 2 sort of prostate cancer results at the moment?
I guess specifically for prostate cancer, it's potentially a really credible alternative to standard of care. That a lot of patients just rather not deal with the side effects. It's very safe, and it has really promising efficacy signals, which I believe we can improve upon in larger trials where you can start, adjusting for the protocols and potentially doing combination therapies. So it really gives potential here for a new alternative that really can be much safer than what else is out there for prostate cancer. And again, it's the second largest cause of death in men from cancer. So we're very excited about where this trial can take us.
For that. Just a question from one of the viewers here, and I guess it ties into a question we have as well. Thanks for an interesting presentation. From an investor's point of view, is there any expected return on our investment, and if so, what timing? And I guess for yourself, what do you think is going to really drive that share price and get investors their return on their investment, if you don't mind?
It's a very good question. It's a very fair question. And, we had a number of what we thought were very positive announcements this year, and the share price didn't move an inch. And I think it's a combination of a couple of things. One is we have had stops and starts over the past 6-7 years, and the market is tougher, but also because the COVID, we actually basically had to redo all our preclinical work on a whole new drug. It actually caused a lot of delays, and also the appetite people just got tired, frankly. And even though we got great results, people want to see things happening in humans. They want to make sure it's safe in humans. They want to make sure it works in humans. And that's the stage we're at now. And the prostate results from the last week really show that. And the upcoming skin cancer trials hopefully will echo that as well. So we're at an interesting stage where we're going to have a lot of interesting catalysts. I can't control what Mr. Market will do, but I can certainly control the program we're doing and the clinical trials that we're working on.
Thank you for that. And I guess that leads into, I think you're about to start the phase 1/2 of your skin cancer trial. Can you tell us a bit more about that, and what do the skin and prostate cancer trials mean for Invion?
Yeah, so the skin cancer trial has really two implications. The first one is, does it work on skin cancer? And Australia is the skin cancer capital of the world. Can we demonstrate that we have a safe and effective alternative to standard of care that doesn't create that scarring? And if it does, and some of these trial results show that, we could potentially have a faster path to approving this treatment for skin cancer sufferers. The second thing that the skin cancer trial will do is actually break the mold about cancer treatment. So many in the industry think, well, you've got one technology, it only works on one type of cancer. Now, if we demonstrate safety and efficacy in 2 different cancers using 2 different formulations, one's topical and one's systemic, and we have safety and efficacy data in both, we can potentially start breaking down the fact that we can have one type of treatment that can treat multiple cancers, and basically emphasize and reiterate and validate the preclinical work we've done with Peter MacCallum Cancer Center and the Hudson Institute of Medical Research.
Okay, brilliant. Thanks for that. And I guess other than these trials, are there any other sort of near-term milestones that investors can look forward to, or is this sort of the main plot at the moment?
Well, there are those two trials that we talked about. There's also the HPV work that's being funded by Hudson Pharma that'll open up the whole new area of antimicrobials. And I guess we're also working on an anogenital cancer trial on the back of some of the preclinical work we did with Peter Mac, and also mentioned about the glioblastoma work we're doing with Han Lim. So basically, we've got partners that are helping to fund some of our programs. We've got a pipeline of clinical programs and some preclinical programs. And so all of those really point to a number of catalysts that will be occurring over the next 1 to 2 years, which I think is the horizon that many biotech investors really want to be focused on.
Okay. Yeah, and I guess with your line of trajectory at the moment, where do you see yourself and the company Invion in the next 3 to 5 years?
Well, I guess if you think about comparing it with other cancer companies at clinical trial stage, you can basically add a 0 or more to valuation. But again, I can't control the market. But what we're really trying to do from a patient perspective is to demonstrate that we have one technology that's potentially more affordable, but also works on multiple cancers. And within 3 to 5 years, we should have plenty of clinical evidence around that in multiple cancers. And that we hope will break the mold on what's possible in terms of cancer treatment.
Sure. Okay, beautiful. I guess last thing, from an investor point of view, if there's one thing that prospective and current investors can take away from this presentation, what would you say that is?
Well, it's investors, and I used to be a professional one for many years, was you look at the downside, what's the probability, and the upside, what's the probability. So if you look at where our market cap is, which is frankly pretty low, there's not a lot of downside. But given what we're looking at, and if you look at the comparables out in the market, if we can do a fraction of what we are planning to do, the upside is pretty interesting. And the technology has been pretty significantly de-risked on the back of this prostate cancer trial. It's something that's been administered on human patients. It's been found to be very safe, and there are really interesting efficacy signals. So that's a really big de-risking event when you've got it in human patients. And so when you think about upside, downside, and de-risking, I think it's a pretty interesting proposition.
Yeah, perfect. All right. Well, thanks for your time, Thian. That was really, really insightful. Yeah, I guess thank you for everyone for tuning in. If you want to look at the recording, this has been recorded and it will be posted on YouTube. Is there any last words you'd like to sort of put in there, Thian, at the moment?
Really just we have been quiet for many years. That's changing now. So I think it'll be a really interesting company, I think, to watch out for. We're very excited internally about where this program is, and we're really at the inflection point now, which we're super excited about. Brilliant.
All right. Well, thank you so much for your time. Thank you everyone for attending the webinar, and yeah, I guess we'll see you for the next one. Thanks, guys.
Great. Thanks, Sebastian.
Peace.